The Letherian council chamber was a marvel of alien design, glass that wasn't glass, metal that pulsed like it had a heartbeat. I stood alone in the center, bathed in soft blue light, surrounded by 12 beings who each represented a species older, larger, and far more technologically advanced than humanity. They called it a diplomatic summit. But I knew it wasn't. Not really. When civilizations that span 1,000 star systems suddenly send you an invitation, it's not for tea. It's a test. They asked the question once. Politely. Translated through the embedded neural matrix in my skull. What is the apex predator of your world? I smiled. Didn't answer. Not yet. I waited. They asked again, this time with a subtle edge in the phrasing. Like they were probing for a lie I hadn't told yet. I looked at each of them. The Zereth diplomat, a cloud of sentient spores suspended in a containment field. The Valkyrie, whose elongated eyes blinked vertically as they studied me. The Vorath, encased in glistening obsidian armor that smelled faintly of ozone and death. Each of them had conquered their own worlds, subjugated lesser species, and stepped into the stars. They expected something wild. Something monstrous. A tiger. A wolf. A viral weapon, maybe. They wanted an answer that would fit into their tidy classification system of predator-prey hierarchy. So I gave them the only truthful answer there was. I pointed at myself. And I smiled wider. There was silence, then confusion, and finally, laughter. It sounded different in each species. Chittering, clicking, warbled tones. Not all of them were amused, but enough of them were. To them, my answer was absurd. Comical. Arrogant. But they didn't know. Not really. They'd evolved past violence. They'd sterilized their ecosystems, domesticated their nature, bred the predator out of themselves until survival was an inherited privilege, not a fought-for right. They forgot what it meant to earn your place at the top of the food chain. So I told them a story. I spoke of the world I came from. Of acid rain and crushing gravity. Of predators that hunted with venom and patience. Of viruses that learned to mutate faster than we could cure. Of wildfires, earthquakes, and extinction events that left nothing but ash and opportunity. I told them how we ran down prey over miles, not because we were faster, but because we didn't stop. How we learned to adapt faster than anything else on our planet, not because we were the smartest, but because we had no other choice. And then I told them how we turned that instinct inward. How the most dangerous predator on Earth wasn't a beast or a microbe, it was another human with motive and time. When I finished, no one laughed. No one blinked. I could feel the shift in the room. A silence not born of respect, but calculation. They hadn't invited me to marvel at our potential. They were trying to decide if they could afford to ignore us. And now, they knew they couldn't. After the council dispersed, they left behind only silence and the faint, lingering trace of tension in the air, like the residue of static after a storm. I stood alone in the center of that gleaming chamber long after the last of them had drifted, crawled, or slithered away. My neural implant buzzed softly, trying to keep pace with a dozen languages translating thoughts I no longer cared to hear. Alex waited for me near the exit. Tall, crystalline, graceful in the way only species who had never known war could be. Its face, if you could call the reflective surface a face, tilted ever so slightly when I approached. "You unsettled them," it said, its voice as calm as flowing water. "That was not the intention of this summit." "Then you shouldn't have asked the question," I said. Alex's form shimmered as its internal light dimmed, a subtle sign of discomfort. "We wished to understand humanity's ecological role. Your evolutionary placement among terrestrial fauna." "You wanted to measure threat level," I corrected, stopping just short of it. "And now you have your answer." It didn't respond. Maybe it couldn't. Maybe it was recalibrating every protocol it had for dealing with primitive species. I followed Alex through the winding corridor that led to the diplomatic quarters they'd set up for me. The Letherians had gone to great lengths to make it feel like Earth, synthetic gravity calibrated to 1G, filtered air with familiar nitrogen-oxygen balance, even artificial sunlight peeking through a simulated sky dome. But it all felt sterile, like a museum exhibit. A replica made by someone who had only ever read about humanity in archived data, never actually walked among us. I sat down on the edge of the bed, too soft, too clean, and activated the console built into the far wall. Dozens of files flickered to life, the latest reports from deep space relays. I ignored most of them. Only one mattered. Colony 871 Delta. Located on the edge of known accord space. Human-led, multi-species cooperative. Population, 38,000. Status, silent. 3 weeks ago, it was thriving. Now, the Accord had lost all contact. No distress signal. No planetary defense activation. Just nothing. Like the entire colony had blinked out of existence. Of course, they hadn't come to Earth when it first went dark. No, they waited. Watched. Hoping someone else would take the first step. Because despite all their technological brilliance and centuries of progress, the one thing they still didn't have was courage. And that's why I was here. Not because I was the best diplomat, but because I had the one quality they couldn't synthesize or replicate, the ability to walk toward danger without expecting to walk back. I stared at the hollow report on the screen. The Accord wouldn't touch that colony, not now. Not after what I'd told them. Not with the possibility that something had awakened out there, something old, something hungry. And so, Earth would go first. Alone, as always. I leaned forward, keyed the comms, and said, "Authorization rail, Earth Command. Prep my transport. I'm going in." The screen blinked, confirmed receipt. And then there was no turning back. The jumps to 871 Delta were smooth, too smooth. No signal disruption. No gravity wells. No pirate interference. Just sterile silence between stars. The kind of silence you don't trust. The kind that presses against the cockpit glass and makes you feel like something's watching from the dark. I'd made plenty of solo runs before. I'd landed on volcanic moons and walked through derelict warships still echoing with phantom radio chatter. But this felt different. Not hostile. Not even ominous. Just hollow. As if something had already passed through and taken everything that mattered with it. When I dropped into orbit around 871 Delta, the first thing I noticed was the quiet. No welcoming hails. No auto-beacons. No satellites pinging telemetry. It was all still running, systems were active, but no one was using them. It was like arriving at a house with all the lights on and the door wide open. I brought the shuttle down on landing pad A, dust kicking up in spirals under the retrothrusters. The pad was clean. Not abandoned long enough to gather significant wear or corrosion, which only added to the unease clawing at my spine. The first step off the shuttle was always the hardest, especially when you were alone. I pulled my sidearm from its magnetic holster, just in case. My boots made a dull thud on the landing surface. No wind. No sounds. The temperature was steady. Gravity normal. Nothing out of place, except for the absence of people. The main colony hub loomed ahead. A sleek, modular structure designed for rapid deployment and expansion. From the outside, everything appeared intact. No signs of struggle. No structural damage. The airlock accepted my credentials without protest. Lights flickered to life as I stepped inside, and the hallway lit up like the colony was expecting me. Then I started to notice the little things. Chairs pulled back slightly from tables. A coffee mug shattered in a hallway, dried liquid long since crusted to the floor. A child's toy half submerged in a planter box. These weren't signs of panic. These were signs of interruption. Like life had simply stopped mid-motion. I activated a small recon drone and launched it down the hallway. It hovered smoothly, relaying telemetry and a live feed back to my wrist display. No movement. No life forms. No bodies. I entered the central plaza, what should have been the colony's beating heart. The open space atrium was filled with benches, storefronts, hydroponic gardens. All perfectly intact. I expected graffiti, evidence of looting, maybe signs of a riot. But there was nothing. It wasn't just that they were gone. It was like they'd been plucked from time, removed with surgical precision. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, just at the edge of perception. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Something deeper, like the rhythm of a heart, but slower, older. It didn't come through my ears. It came from within the colony walls themselves. A pulsing, faint thrum. I reached for the console near the central terminal. Tried to pull the last few days of logs. The system denied access. Data locked. Clearance override required. But the colony was under Earth jurisdiction, which meant someone, or something, had locked it after Earth had lost contact. I wasn't alone. I knew that now. Something was still here. And it was watching. I descended into the lower levels of the colony, where the light grew dimmer and the air thicker, like the facility itself was holding its breath. Every step echoed too loudly, reverberating off steel walls that seemed to close in as I moved deeper. My hand rested on the grip of my sidearm, but I knew it was more habit than hope. If something had taken down this colony without a sound, bullets wouldn't save me. Emergency lighting bathed the maintenance corridors in a dull red glow. It wasn't the flickering panic of a failing system. Everything functioned perfectly. Power flow was steady. Environmental controls were green. It was as if the entire colony was asleep, waiting to be reawakened. But I didn't trust it. Not anymore. I found the medbay first. The glass doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a pristine room filled with empty beds. Charts were still active on holoscreens. One was even running vitals. Flatlined, of course. Cabinets stood open, but not ransacked. Surgical tools were laid out in careful arrangement, as if someone had just stepped out mid-procedure. I moved to the terminal and swiped through the patient logs. Everything ended on the same day. No entries after that. No discharge records. No fatalities logged. They didn't die. They just disappeared. In one of the isolation units, I found something worse than bodies. A uniform. A human one. Empty. Folded neatly on the floor, boots standing beside it. On the collar was a name tag. Reyes. I didn't know her. Didn't need to. She'd been here, alive, breathing. Now she was gone, and the way the clothing was arranged told me she hadn't run. Hadn't fought. She'd just stopped being. The air changed around me, subtly at first. Colder. Denser. My ears popped with the pressure shift, and that deep thrumming sound returned. Closer now. Rhythmic. Calculated. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't natural either. I turned toward the sound, weapon raised, and that's when I saw it, just for a moment. A figure. Too tall. Too narrow. It moved like smoke underwater, limbs too long to belong to anything born on Earth. Its head turned toward me, though it had no face. No eyes. Just a smooth, oily surface that shimmered like it had been stretched over something old and broken. I fired. 3 shots. Clean. Centimass. It didn't flinch. It didn't bleed. It just melted back into the darkness, like it had only been pretending to be there in the first place. Then came the whisper. Not sound. Not language. A presence. Pressing into my skull like ice water. You are late. I stumbled back, heart hammering against my ribs. Whatever it wasn't just intelligent. It was ancient. And it wasn't hiding because it was afraid. It was hiding because it was waiting. And now I'd walked right into its nest. I holstered the weapon. Not because I was safe, but because I wanted my hands free. The corridors tightened around me as I moved deeper, almost as if the station was shifting, subtly, imperceptibly, but enough for my instincts to catch it. It was something in the way the corners curved where they hadn't before, or how doors that had once led to utility closets now opened into long, unfamiliar passages. The colony wasn't just abandoned. It was changing. And it was alive. The thrum was constant now, pulsing beneath the floor panels, rising up through my boots like a second heartbeat. I followed it, weapon lowered but ready. I didn't know what I expected to find. A nest, maybe. A host. Something I could see, something I could fight. Instead, I found the command center. It was untouched. No signs of violence. No broken equipment. The screens were on standby, waiting for input. Chairs were pushed slightly away from the consoles, like the officers had stood up in unison and never sat down again. One of the screens blinked softly, and I approached. The colony log was locked, but I bypassed the interface with an emergency override key from my shuttle. The last entries were audio only. No visuals. Just raw sound. I listened to them one by one. The first was normal. Administrator Rhines reporting hydroponics yield, slight increase in oxygen output, routine maintenance. The second was more tense. A technician reporting strange fluctuations in gravity sensors. Objects shifting slightly when no one was near them. A few workers experiencing hallucinations. Dismissed as stress. The third was nothing but breathing. A long, slow inhale, followed by a deeper exhale, like something ancient and massive was waking up for the first time in centuries. I skipped forward. Found a final log. Only a single word spoken, over and over. Listen. The voice didn't belong to any colonist. It didn't sound human. It was deeper, layered with frequencies my implants struggled to process. The word echoed in my mind long after I cut the recording. The drone I had launched earlier chimed in. It had returned. Footage flickered onto my display, the main courtyard, empty, but not abandoned. In the center was a shape. Low to the ground. Unmoving. I studied it frame by frame. It was a person. No, not a person anymore. It was someone's skin. Laid out like a garment. Intact. No cuts. No blood. Just emptied. I swallowed hard and sent the drone back out. Then I heard the footsteps. Soft. Wet. They came from the hallway behind me, moving slow, deliberate. I turned, gun raised, but saw nothing. Still, I knew something was there. Watching. Breathing. Testing. Not attacking. Not yet. I understood the message now. This wasn't a massacre. It wasn't mindless consumption. It was a study. I was being measured. I activated my emergency beacon, uplinked to the Accord and Earth Prime. I kept my voice calm. Colony 871 Delta is compromised. Threat is unidentified and non-terrestrial. Proceeding with caution. I paused. Then added quietly, "Tell command to send no one else. This thing doesn't want victims. It wants a challenge." And now it had one. They came in just before local dusk, 3 shuttles, Earth Recon Spec Ops, riding in like ghosts on black thrusters. No noise. No lights. Not even a greeting over comms. The Accord wouldn't have sent anyone. But Earth. Earth knew better than to leave one of its own in the dark. They moved like shadows through the colony streets, armored figures in matte-on-matte exosuits with adaptive optics and biofeedback loops. Efficient, silent, human. They didn't waste time with introductions. We weren't here for politics anymore. Kira Holt was the first to find me. She pulled off her helmet, short-cropped hair damp with sweat, eyes burning with purpose. We'd served together once, before she joined Black Ops full-time. She was a ghost with a grudge. If Command had sent her, that meant they knew this wasn't just a failed colony. "What are we looking at?" she asked, straight to business. "Not a what? A who?" I said. "It thinks. It learns. It's not just killing. It's adapting." She didn't flinch. Didn't smirk. She believed me. That was enough. Her team, Vex and Morin, set up a portable relay. They triangulated the heat signatures left behind by the colonists. Traces still clung to the floors, the walls, like ghostly fingerprints. But none of them went anywhere. Every signature just stopped. Mid-step. Mid-breath. Gone. We moved as a unit now, clearing the sublevels systematically. The deeper we went, the more the colony twisted. It wasn't metal anymore. Not entirely. The alloy was laced with something organic. Not grown, not fused. Transformed. Vex scanned a support beam and cursed under his breath. "This isn't steel anymore. It's a carbon silicate lattice. Bone matrix." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We all felt it. We weren't in a colony. We were inside something else now. The corridors led us to what used to be the fusion core. It still hummed, but not with energy. With breath. Like lungs pulling in synthetic air. Pulsing in rhythm with that deep frequency that had never stopped beating beneath our feet. That's when the whisper returned. Not in words. In feelings. You bring others. More teeth. More fear. Kira tensed. That voice. You hearing it too? I nodded once. It's not trying to scare us, I said. It's studying our response. We didn't wait. Kira gave the signal. Vex dropped a containment net over the core, trying to isolate the pulse. Morin moved to breach a secondary panel. I kept watch. But I knew it was already here. It didn't appear like a beast. It unfolded, out of air, out of walls, out of assumption. A mass of limbs that weren't limbs, eyes that blinked in places eyes shouldn't exist. It looked like a dozen dead gods fused together by logic and nightmare. Kira opened fire. The creature rippled and screamed, but not in pain, in surprise. It hadn't expected resistance. Hadn't expected humans. And now it was learning the one truth every alien in the galaxy forgets. We don't fear the dark. We hunt in it. It hit like a storm. Fast, hard, relentless. One moment we were holding a perimeter around the core, the next we were scattered across the floor like tossed dolls. The thing moved between dimensions of space like the rules didn't apply to it anymore. Vex was the first to go, ripped into the air, suspended, twisted into a shape that no human body should ever make. There was no scream. Just a sickening crunch as he disappeared into the ceiling, leaving only a trail of blood smeared along the beam. Kira was already back on her feet before I could shout her name, firing plasma rounds that sparked and sizzled across the creature's hide. It flinched, not from pain, but surprise. The way it moved, the way it adapted, it had never fought before. It had consumed. Observed. It didn't know how to handle resistance that pushed back. I moved behind it while it lunged for Morin, who dodged too slow. A claw, if you could call it that, scraped across his chest, carving through armor like paper. He went down screaming. Not dead, but out of the fight. The air thickened with heat and static. The thing split again, dividing itself like a cell under stress. One part climbed the walls, the other lunged toward the relay, toward the only thing linking us to the outside. I saw Kira break formation and throw herself at it, screaming something I couldn't hear over the rising hum. Her blade struck true, burying itself into what looked like its spinal crest. The creature roared, not just aloud but inside our minds, flooding our neurons with raw sound that wasn't sound at all. Like being shouted at by a god made of old teeth and time. It threw her across the room. I caught her before she hit the ground. She was bleeding, lip split, breath ragged. "You good?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She coughed, wiped blood from her chin. "I'll die later. Right now I'm pissed." That's when I saw it. The pulse emitter on the relay station. Damaged, flickering. But still usable. I crawled over, dragging myself through debris and blood, and keyed in an override code. Earth Command had given me access to one final contingency protocol, EOS trigger. A frequency spike, calibrated to force molecular destabilization in non-human bioforms. A weapon so specific, the Accord had outlawed it the moment it was developed. I hit it anyway. The emitter screamed. So did the creature. Its body began to glitch, literally, like bad data scrambling a visual feed. Pieces of it flickered in and out, limbs twisting, folding, disintegrating. It reached for me, more reflex than strategy, just as Kira emptied her last magazine into its burning core. With one final shriek, it exploded into vapor and fragments. Then silence. Real silence. I collapsed beside her, breathing hard. "We done?" she asked. I looked around. No movement. No whispers. "Yeah," I said. "But now they'll know." Who? Everything else out there watching. Listening. I leaned back against the wall. We told them what Earth's apex predator is. And this time, no one laughed.